Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Welcome onto the stage. John Mack, thank you so much for being here. He's going to be speaking to us about psilocybin mushrooms in Southern Africa. The presentation will be about 20 to 25 minutes, and then he will be available on the side of the stage afterwards for any questions you may have. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me clearly? Okay, good afternoon. How's everybody? You guys all right? You guys stoned? All right, today we're going to talk about hunting magic mushrooms in the wild. I think a lot of South Africans at the moment, they're tuning into this psilocybin frequency that's permeating through our media. And it deserves to be permeating because magic mushrooms are the key to mental health in the future for human beings. They're going to replace SSRIs. They're going to help us with end-of-life palliative care. And for me personally, for about 15 years now, I've been hunting magic mushrooms in the wild. I'm one of the guys who doesn't need to go to a dealer to get his mushrooms. All right, so this is me here. I'm splitting a mushroom in half. A couple of the things I do for the community is I do forays. I take out people, usually between 80 to 100 people. I take them out in the wild and I teach them about mushrooms. I teach them about all the parts of the mushrooms, why mushrooms are in the environment, what mushrooms do for the environment, which mushrooms are poisonous, which mushrooms are edible. Mushroom hunting is a prerequisite to it is knowledge. You have to know what you're doing. There's no rule that will help you to identify if a mushroom is edible or not. Knowledge is the identifying key. Okay, so I'm a mycologist. It's quite an unusual thing. And I know many times when I tell people I'm a mycologist, they have no idea what that is. So a mycologist is a person who studies mycology, and mycology is the study of fungi. Right. Mycologists, you get different kinds. You get mycologists that specialize in molds on foods. You get mycologists that specialize in funguses and soils. And I'm a field mycologist. So what I specialize in is going out hunting new species, getting them DNA sequenced, categorizing them, and entering them into our greater data of species. All right, so I represent a society. It's called the Mycological Society of Southern Africa. And it was really born out of the fact that I was hunting mushrooms on my own in 2012 when I came back here. And it was quite unsafe. And I would find a really cool mushroom and I wouldn't be able to share it with anybody. And I think there's a great value in being able to share your passions. So what I did is I started to form a WhatsApp group. It was the first mushroom WhatsApp group of its kind in 2015 in the world. And through that WhatsApp group, we started sharing our finds, a handful of people that are still around in our society today. And eventually it started to aggregate and get bigger and bigger. And today, we're actually in all the provinces in South Africa. And we're also in all the countries below the equator. We're just about to open up in Angola. We open a mycological society and we provide identification as well as citizen science to people in Southern Africa. Okay, so today specifically I want to talk about the psilocybin mushrooms that occur in KwaZulu-Natal. I travel the country with this expo and I like to stick to the province that I'm in because otherwise the talk would be very, very long. The good news is KwaZulu-Natal has got the most species of psilocybin mushrooms out of all of the provinces in South Africa. In fact, KwaZulu-Natal has more magic mushroom species than the whole of Australasia, the whole of Asia. So we do pretty well here. This beautiful blue mushroom here on the screen is a Copperlandia. And that bluing color that you see, that is caused by the presence of an alkaloid called psilocin. Psilocin makes you hallucinate. Okay, the first species that we're going to talk about is one that if you've ever eaten psilocybin mushrooms, this is most likely the one that you ate. There's several different kinds. It's quite similar to cannabis, where Psilocybe cubensis has got many varieties that are available, and some of them are even pornographic. There's some funny names. There's golden teachers, albino penis envy. There's also, there's quite a few penis envy strains out there actually. They're very strong penis envy. All right. And then there's actually some land race types, and those are ones that are brought from the wild and then they permeated into the cultivation space. And I'm responsible for doing that several times over. The ones here on the screen are wild Natal super strength, which is a variety of psilocybin mushroom that I brought to the cultivation world. It was occurring in the wild. Hippies in Natal were hunting it throughout the Midlands and in the Mist Belt, and I managed to capture it in 2016. And now Natal super strength is the mushroom that most South Africans have consumed if they are entheogenic mushroom users. This is Psilocybe suboriginaceans. It's got the street name Space Cadets. Both of these psilocybes, the one before and this one, they've got several likenesses. That's why I skipped the slide, because there's similar things I want to show you. Has this thing got a pointer? Yes. Oh, you can't see it. So if we have a look at a psilocybe in comparison to other magic mushrooms, psilocybes generally have this annulus. This is the skirt. The correct term is annulus, and the annulus is actually caused from when the mushroom was like this, in the state of being a pin. And as the cap opened, it tore away and it left a veil. And the veil is the annulus. In the psilocybes, the veil is normally a blue color, and that is because of the damaging. So inside psilocybin mushrooms, some of the mushrooms have got high psilocin. Psilocin has an enzymatic reaction when it's exposed to oxygen. There's an enzyme that starts to break it down, and it makes a blue color. It actually shows the presence of copper. This, unusually, is another psilocybe without an annulus. And that's an identifying feature for this psilocybe. Endemic to Natal, you can see in its name, Psilocybe natalensis. And it's actually quite a young mushroom species. It was discovered by Joachim Gartz in 1995. He found it in the Midlands in Winterton. This mushroom grows in rings where dung of cows used to be. So the cow has a crap there, and the mycelium gets inside the dung. It's actually from spores in the air, or it's existing spores that were on the ground where the animal defecated, and it starts to eat the grass that the cow ate. The cow, when it eats grass, it goes through 4 stomachs. It's a ruminant. And the process of digestion gets very hot. It actually goes up to 75 degrees. And any mushroom growers here will know that that's pasteurization temperature. So animals such as cows, sheep, donkeys, zebras, rhinos, they're actually pasteurizing grass as they digest it. What this does is it breaks down the cell walls of the grass, and it allows the mycelium, which is the fungus, to actually permeate there and get the sugar out of it, because that's what fungus lives on. It lives on sugar. We're going to move on to a different genus here now. The ones we looked at before were saprophytic. Let's go back. They grow on dung. Coprophytic. They grow on dung. They're coprophytes. The next species we're going to look at is the Gymnopolis, and it's a saprophyte. It grows on wood. Okay, so there's 3 main kinds of macrofungi. There's many, many kinds of microfungi. But in macrofungi, we get saprophytes that grow on wood. We get coprophytes that grow on dung. And not in this presentation, because there's no psilocybin containing examples in the wild, but you get mycorrhizal fungi. And that grows in association with certain trees' roots. But we're not going to look at that today. That's for another talk. Gymnopolis is easily identified from the psilocybe that we looked before. And I want to teach you guys something fundamental today. Perhaps this is the only thing that you'll remember about my talk. And if it is, I'll be grateful. If we have a look at the scientific or the Latin name of this mushroom, it says Gymnopolis dialepis. But if I skip to the next slide, there's another Gymnopolis. So that's confusing. What's this mushroom really called? It's actually called dialepis. Okay. So in Latin, in the nomenclature in Latin and the taxonomy, we have the surname, then the first name. So this mushroom is called dialepis. and its surname, it's from the family, the genus is what we call it in mycology, of Gymnopolis. All right, Gymnopolises have got rusty brown spores, they're orange, and they're very bitter. So if you had to consume this mushroom in an entheogenic way, it's actually very, very bitter. It can be quite hard to handle. It's got, this one in particular actually has the highest amount of alkaloids of any Gymnopolis in the world, Dialepis, and its epithet is actually from Australia. So I was the one who found this species here in South Africa. A lot of these species I'm responsible for finding in the wild. I dedicated many, many years to hunting them. I was up at 4 o'clock in the morning while everybody's fast asleep, and I'm hunting mushrooms before the worms and the birds get them. So Dialepis is bitter, like all Gymnopolises. You need to consume quite a lot, about 10 grams dried. So if we imagine, if we had to eat this out the wild, mushrooms lose about 10 times their weight when you dry them. So we would need to eat quite a lot of fresh mushrooms here to hallucinate. However, when you do consume this mushroom, it has an alkaloid called araginacin in it. And araginacin causes feelings of happiness. So Dialepis is particularly interesting to me because in the future, in the cultivation space where I'm a businessman, we may want to grow this mushroom for antidepressant medication. Araginacin is a very interesting alkaloid in that space. Gymnopolis siberia is another Gymnopolis also found in Australasia. I also found it here in South Africa. It's even weaker than the one before, but you can see it's quite beautiful, and you know, all mushrooms are in fact magical to me. They don't have to make you high. There's magic in the beauty of mushrooms. And talking about the beauty of mushrooms, here's a particularly beautiful one, and I'm going to explain some taxonomy to you now. So we see the name of this mushroom is Purpurosquamulosus. Quite a long name, but if you syllabalize it, it's easy to remember. And purpuro in Latin means the color purple. Squamules are these scales that you see here. So it's saying purple squamules. And when we look at the mushroom, we can see on the pallius, which is the cap, it's got these purple squamules. So this is a great name. And a lot of the time, in the Latin name, it either describes where the mushroom was found, who found it, or an identifying characteristic that sticks out about that mushroom. If you have a look here, you can see some blue coloring, little patches on this mushroom. And that's actually where insects have landed on this mushroom. It's so sensitive, is psilocin, to oxygen. And that is an indication to me that that is a magic mushroom. So certain magic mushrooms do not bruise blue, but the majority of them do. So if you see a mushroom and you touch it and it turns blue, not a pre-existing blue, a blue that wasn't there, then you touch it and it turns blue, you could be onto a winner. All right, Pinaleus cincellus is known as the weed Pinaleus. It is the most common magic mushroom in the world. A lot of people might think Psilocybe cubensis is, but that's not true. Pinaleus cincellus is very tolerant in where it can grow. It doesn't mind quite cold temperatures, and it actually thrives in temperatures up to 30 degrees. Pinaleus cincellus, just like the Gymnopolis dialepis, is quite a medium potency mushroom. However, there are very interesting stories that come out of Victorian England about this mushroom, and that's where it gets its common name, weed Pinaleus. In the Agaricus bisporus farms, which is the portobello white mushroom that you're all eating in the shop, they would actually have this mushroom permeate into their agriculture there. And the reason is because in London especially, in Victorian times, they would go around and pick up the horse shit and put it onto wagons and take it to mushroom factories. They would boil the horse shit and they would make mushroom farm out of it. Okay. A lot of the time, the spores would be able to make it through the pasteurization process. Some spores have got very thick chitinous shells, and they're able to even withstand radiation. So this mushroom would pop up in these portobello farms in London, and the children in those days, because child labor was fine, would go along and they would grab a bunch of mushrooms, twist it, stick it in a brown bag so you can't see through the brown bag, put it into trays, and people would walk around London and they would sell bags of mushrooms like you sell popcorn. Inside those bags were some magic mushrooms mixed in that were growing amongst the portobellos, this mushroom. And there are very good stories if you want to spend some time on Google where you can read the trip reports from these Victorian English people where they have no concept of hallucinating or tripping and they believe that they're bewitched. It's very good. It actually, you'll battle to get through it. It's so funny. We're going to look at some more Pinaliuses. So this one's called olivaceous because it's like an olive brown color. It's a very rare magic mushroom, and in fact most people who hunt magic mushrooms may never find this mushroom in the wild in their entire careers. But where we are here in Natal, you can find it. You can find it normally around people's vegetable gardens. It's a very weak magic mushroom, but it's still a very pretty one. And you can see here on the Pinalius, there's different color bands. Those bands are called zonate bands because they're zoned, all right? And they actually represent different parts of the cap that are at different levels of moisture. So when the flesh is the least moist on the outside, it gets dark like that. And then it gets lighter as it gets the most moist. And this causes a banding effect, similar to like an RAF plane back in World War II. We're going to look at another Pinalius. This one is femicolor. And it can come, I want to express to you how different mushrooms can look. So when we look there, that mushroom there looks quite different to these mushrooms in my hand. They're exactly the same species. And this is why I have a job, is because the apps on your phone cannot do what I can do. And that is tell you that that mushroom is the same as that mushroom. And I want to tell you not to use any apps. Do not make me redundant. And you might die. Hey, these apps, they're inaccurate. Sometimes they tell people that death caps are magic mushrooms. But you can see the morphology here. It's quite broad. However, both these mushrooms contain alkaloids that cause you to hallucinate. They also cause you to find a oneness with the earth, oneness with nature. Copelandia species. So we have Pinalius and we have Copelanda. They're very similar. They've got gills under their caps over here that are inaquiharmoniferous. This means that the gills, if you looked at them, they look like they're camouflaged. They've got patches that are lighter and darker. And this is due to the maturation of spores at different rates. And that's an identifying feature of this mushroom and the Pinalius we saw before. But what differs this from a Pinalius is if we have a look at the stipe or the stem on Copelandas, they are fibrillose, the stipes. They've got little fibrils, and those are unknotted hyphae. So when a mushroom is formed, right, so the mushroom is the fruit of the fungus. It's not the fungus. I think a lot of people see a mushroom like there's a fungus. No, that's the fruit of a fungus. The fungus is in the ground, or the fungus is in the log, or the fungus is in the cow turd, or whatever it is. But the mushroom is the fruit. And the way that a mushroom is actually formed is that when the fungus has consumed all the sugar in what it's in, it starts to push its little wispy threads, which are hyphae, out of what it was consuming. When they get to the air, if the air is moist enough, those hyphae are able to knot, and then the hyphae actually 3D print a mushroom. The species before and this one are two new Copelandas here from KZN. They come from the Assegai Bothas Hill area. This one here was growing with dietes plants. You can see there's dietes, the iris. They were growing at the base of these irises. This one here was growing in mulch garden. So if you're in Durban, this is Berea down the road. If you want to do a permaculture garden, you're most likely going to have these mushrooms come up. They come up in a lot of people's permaculture gardens. It's a new species. You can see it's bluing here on its stipe. They're incredibly potent, and we're busy working in the laboratory with these at the moment. Copelanda bisporus is very similar to the other Copelanda that we're going to look at next, which is Copelanda cyanescens, the most common one. And these mushrooms are pretty common in neotropical areas throughout the world, and they're very potent. Copperlander bisporus, one of the most potent magic mushrooms in the world. Copperlander cyanescens, another very strong magic mushroom. It's scored the highest readouts of all alkaloids and all magic mushrooms. Here it is growing on cow dung, so it's coprophilic. Pluteus glauciotintius, another one that I found here in South Africa. And it's saprophytic, so it's growing here on logs. It's got a very crisp stop, it's one of its identifying features, and salmon-colored spores, which make its gills go a salmon color here. Pluteus salicinus is the weakest magic mushroom in South Africa. It's very common in Natal, likes to grow wherever you have horses, where you throw out the waste bedding from your stables. Okay, just quickly want to touch on cultivating psilocybin mushrooms in South Africa. I have a company called Entheogenica. We are partnered with a company called Science, and this is me in the world's first magic mushroom facility. All right, it's the world's first commercial magic mushroom facility, where we're growing magic mushrooms and selling them to people around the world legally. And it is an industry that's starting to open up. And just now, we're going to have a bigger expo than the Cannabis Expo. Thank you very much, guys.